Good morning. Welcome to our session or the Mayor Summit. And we're going to start off with some introductions so you can get a feel for who's before you. I'll just kick us off. Mark Jackson. I'm with Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth. And this is my second year here at the festival, and we're coming from a different angle this year, sort of an extension of what we did last year. And we look forward to kind of sharing with you the importance of data and how it can help advance your mission.
Thanks, Mark Jackson. Hi, everybody. I'm Dawn Boudwin with Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth as well. Our focus at the Center for Inclusive Growth is an In Solidarity initiative, which is our $500 million commitment towards closing the racial wealth and opportunity gap in the U.S. specifically. And so, like Mark, this is my second year being here. Really excited to see all of you, and thanks for being at the session. And as Mark said, we're going to dive into a bit around how data can be used to make various decisions for cities in particular, really using that to make decisions around policy, decisions around investment, and things of that nature. Oh, good job. So, as I mentioned, we wanted to spend some time to dig into data a bit. Mark is way more on the data side than I am, so I'm going to mostly be here looking nice, but he's going to go do a deep dive into some of the tools that we have available. But I think the key part here is to also think about how we leverage data to make informed decisions for those various pieces that I said, investment, policy making, and things of that nature. And so there's also a benefit that we want to go over around using publicly available data, as well as data that you can purchase to help inform some of the work that you're doing, because sometimes the publicly available data has blind spots and doesn't actually cover all of the things that you need. So we'll dig into that a bit. But also at the Center for Inclusive Growth, we have a whole insights team that actually really goes into the weeds on these pieces, and we can be a really good partner as you're thinking through how to apply this to your whatever you're trying to tackle locally. And then the other big thing that we want to make sure we do in this is show how you can use those tools. Good. How we can use the tools, but also how they have been used, right? So it's always good to hear about all the tools that are out there, but what are some of the case studies that have worked and shown that leveraging this data in ways to actually make informed policy decisions and things like that can be, what are some illustrative examples? So that's what we'll be going into next.
Super. Kind of to give you the roadmap of where we're going. In this importance of data, taking advantage of the public-private collaborations that can happen. Last year we were here and we presented a panel on the benefits of public, you guys are shaking your head, you remember, public and private partnerships. So this is sort of an extension of that. And in some of the studies that have been out there, they speak about, your own data, right? But then how do you partner with other people and being able to take that next step? And so getting that trusted partner for that. And then, as Dawn said, walking through the Solutions Hub, this is going to be sort of a mixed media that we're going to do with you. We're going to share with you the website. And by the way, all that we're sharing with you is available to you for free 99. So free, gratis, everything is free. So you have access to it. Just set up an account and it's available to begin using. She mentions we will do the engagements with the cities, which particular to share a full engagement if you were to work with Mastercard using multiple tools and what it can deliver for you. And then she said move on into the case studies. There's several write-ups that have been done that speak to the importance of data, and I noted them here. But in being able to harness that and get the competitive advantage. Think about the grant writers out there. How do you get your grant selected versus other people's grants? That competitive edge that you need, being able to bring that data and then act on that data. From that also, you have looking at different programs and projects and finding ways to unlock the data. So many people have access to information, but they're buried in it. They don't have the right tools to kind of digest it and turn it into something actionable. That is the driving force behind what we're going to share with you today. And then also, how do you work smarter as an organization with that data? Now that you have it, it can help you do your programming for financial literacy, programming for small businesses. Like, where do you invest those funds? So that's kind of what we'll take you through. This is the Center for Inclusive Growth Solutions Hub that we'll move to now. And the very first one is the Inclusive Growth Score. This is the one we'll do more of the deeper dive on, because it has so many different socioeconomic dimensions that can prove and translate to something for you. It's available right now in the US, UK, and we just recently launched Australia. But we're continuing to look at that roadmap to see how do we broaden that footprint to reach down into Latin America, South America. But in the very first one, this Inclusive Growth Score, it's a public access, web-based service that measures the inclusion and growth across the census tract on U.S. cities. So you're able to get to the granular level. It leverages Mastercard sanitized data that is there and is aggregated. It looks like census tract, of course, because we're down to the census level, but it also looks at the data that comes from third parties, this firmographic data. And this is a video that kind of gives you a feel for it.
The Inclusive Growth Score, a tool created by Mastercard Centre for Inclusive Growth, provides data-driven insights for policymakers, investors, and decision-makers to discover new opportunities for helping underserved communities grow and thrive. We leverage public and anonymised Mastercard transaction data to generate an index that reveals a country, region, or local community's economic and social health. You can use our tool to dive into hyper-local metrics across the pillars of place, economy, and community to uncover opportunities for revitalisation and track changes to communities over time with multiple years of insights. Find your community's score today by visiting us at inclusivegrowthscore.com or email us with questions or comments at inclusivegrowthscore@mastercard.com. Let's build an inclusive economy together.
The next tool that we have is the Smart Growth Cities. This was done with some of our partners. It's out of the Brookings Institute. But this allows you to work and get data to kind of future-proof your city. Where is it going? What industries will be important as you move forward? And are you prepared for it? What's the level of complexities? And what are those specific jobs? How do you build that into your strategy? And that is what this particular tool does for us. And it's has a video that goes along with it as well.
The Brookings Workforce of the Future initiative aims to address the growing divide among people and places in the U.S. by empowering companies, workers, and regions. Our tools deliver place-based insights to achieve inclusive growth. The Smart Growth Cities tool is designed for regional, economic, and workforce development officials. In 3 steps, it allows you to evaluate trade-offs among various economic development strategies, and it provides details about each strategy's implications for the local workforce. Before we get started, if you ever need help with the terms used in this tutorial, click on the available glossary buttons, or return to this tutorial to hear definitions in context. First, consider Kansas City, Missouri. Like other metropolitan areas, Greater Kansas City is grappling with the forces of globalization, new technology, and changing workforce demographics. What kinds of economic development strategies should Kansas City pursue in order to improve job quality, drive economic growth, and diversify its economy? After selecting Kansas City from the drop-down at the top of the page, we see a summary of the metro's economy in 3 statistics. Kansas City ranks 29th in total employment as of 2020. It is 64th in median wage and 57th in city complexity, which is a measure of the diversity and sophistication of the local economy. More complex cities, such as San Francisco or New York, tend to grow faster and their workers earn more. The complexity of a region increases as it develops more complex and sophisticated industries. However, there's a trade-off. Complex industries are often not easy or feasible for a region to develop, given the region's current industrial structure. See below how that trade-off plays out in Kansas City.
The social impact data commons, that's specifically for a footprint that's around Washington, D.C., and I don't think that's really applicable for this audience, but it is part of the solutions tool set that we provide. So we're not going to really go into that one. But looking at the Global Digital Inclusion Progress to Parity Scorecard, this looks at 90 different economies around the world and allows you to kind of gauge what that digital divide is. And so it can look at everything from gender to socioeconomic base to rural, urban areas and be able to give you sort of an indicator for that and how your particular country is doing. For the next one is the Social Progress Index. This is the one tool that does not use any sort of economic type indicators in order to show you the kind of the health of your particular community, but it's looking at basic human needs that you have. And so it is something that's a great complement to what you get through the other tools to give you sort of a full picture. So that is made available as well through our solution suite. And then the last one is, if I can get it to move, the last one is the data maturity assessment. And I mentioned that so many people have so much data and they're drowning in it. And a lot of organizations don't understand where they are in that data maturity journey. Some people are early on, some people are more advanced. Some of it is decentralized, some of it is centralized. So this begins to give you at least what that benchmark is for your organization to know where you need to give some attention, to know how you need to partner, and to understand, also begin to measure progress as well, because you can do it before and after any sort of initiative that we have. But these are the tools that we have available to you all for free, as I mentioned. So we'll go back to the presentation.
And as Mark's getting that set up, as we go into this next piece, we're going to really dig into how do you leverage these various tools all together. So we're going to use an example looking into Atlanta, which is Mark's favorite place. And so we'll do a bit of a deep dive so you can see how all this information all at once can be helpful to you in decision making.
This is the inclusive growth score, the first output in doing the presentation. Now, it's quite a bit on this slide, so I'll try to, as I always say, clear the slide when you're going through the presentation training. And looking at the inclusive growth score, it is the average of the inclusion part and the growth part. So those are the metric types. But we look at 3 different pillars. You look at the place pillar that takes into account housing, infrastructure, and the whole built environment that's around that, the economics, so we can get the play that you have there from businesses growth, jobs, spending, loans that happen to businesses, and then community, looking at the economic and social conditions that are around the community that you have there, looking at disparities that you have with pay equity. All of that comes into play here. Now, there are 18 socioeconomic indicators that are used that make up the inclusive growth score. And looking at the inclusion column, all of those are based on ranking that you'll have. So, for instance, how many people downloaded this is a bet Don and I have. How many people downloaded the app for the Hoover or WOVA app or whatever it's called? Okay, great. And for this particular session, there's a handout there that I put in there, and it has the socioeconomic 18 parameters we have here. It also gives you the definition, and it also gives you the sources for each one of these. So in using this, like for affordable housing, that's looking at the percentage of renter-occupied, owner-occupied housing where the cost is less than 30% of income. So that's going to have a number for Atlanta. And then we compare that against all the others that are in that track. And that's that ranking that happens. And let's say for illustrative purposes, that number is 50 or 45. And then you do the same sort of ranking for internet, travel time to work, and all of that. And you come up with an average. And that is what that 47 is for inclusion. And looking at growth, that takes a look at the weighted average that we have against some sort of baseline number. And that baseline number is from 2017 that we have, therefore, growth in a particular track. And then you look at recent performance that you have for that track, which is usually like the year you're in and the previous year, to come up with a value. And again, the value for residential real estate value, net occupancy, all that's done in this average, and that's how you get the 52. And again, inclusion and growth are averaged to give you the overall score that you have for Atlanta, 50. Now, in looking at place, economy, and community, you have those particular average scores as well. And what that allows you to do to see how you have movement from year to year, that's what the +1 or the -2 represents there. And you can also take these numbers that you have and decide, okay, fine, if I'm scoring low in economy, now I know where to put my resources. Or if I have an investor coming and saying, hey, I want to partner with your nonprofit organization, where do you need the help? How do you divert those investment funds that you have? How do you divert human resources that you're going to have working with you? So that is the intent in giving you the overall picture of Atlanta. What the tool also allows you to do is to make benchmark comparisons. You can compare with other cities that are similar to you based upon the urban-rural benchmark metric. You can do it by state, and you can do it by USA, by the country, at the country level. And that's what's done in the second step here. They said, okay, fine, we have an average of 50, excuse me, but how does that sit relative to other cities that are looking like me? Am I really outperforming them? Are they doing something so different that maybe I can partner with them, find out what they're doing, and then implement that within my city? In looking at comparable cities for Jacksonville, Charlotte, Nashville, and Louisville, Kentucky, you can see where they are. And you'll get these heat maps for your output for the inclusive growth score that allows you to see to what degree you have performance that's happening. The darker red to the darker green. Of course, darker red being where you have the most opportunity. Darker green, that's what I'm doing well. Let's continue to do more of that. How do I translate that? So this can also help you answer some of the questions. And you'll see when we go through the case studies where inclusive growth has allowed them to be able to answer those type questions. At the end of this part here, as well as the slide I showed you before, what we always ask in the engagement with the partner, do any of these numbers, do any of these metrics surprise you? Is it what you expected to see? And that begins a conversation that's a very aha moment for some. It reaffirms for others. And in this era of anti-DEI sentiment, you have to defend your work even more and more now. So this can help you have that voice for defense. And again, as Don mentioned, this Atlanta engagement, and this is hypothetical. We did not do this with the city. We did not have the city as a client, but this is another a result that we share with them for social progress index. Again, looking at the dimensions of basic human needs, foundations of well-being, and opportunity, so they can gauge whether it's something that they're underperforming on, performing well, or doing just as expected. So it provides another line of sight to them to have conversations. The Brookings Smart Growth Cities, I really like this one because as cities are changing and trying to attract industries, it lets you know what you need to prepare for. And in this particular engagement, you're looking at this quadrant where the upper left represents those particular industries and sectors that have not been developed very much within your city, but yet they're very important to your strategy. So then you have to understand, well, what are those sectors? And that's what's listed here at the bottom here with the insurance carriers, other financial investment activities, scientific research, and so forth. That's there. And it's nice to know. But then you have to go back and say, well, what are those jobs? What are those jobs? So now I can begin to either teach or do skills training for, or have to bring in from the outside. And that's what part of the output. Go ahead.
Just to add it on to what Mark is talking about, I think it's important. I don't know if you all noticed on the first slide around the inclusive growth score in Atlanta in particular, one of the places where they are starting to see a larger gap is in income inequality, right? And so being able to leverage this Brookings Smart Growth Cities tool, you'll be able to see the industries where you can grow, and where also there will likely be more high paying jobs that you can support your community with. So having this in addition to having the inclusive growth score is really something to leverage and tie in.
Thank you for that. Yes. And this is just an example of the type of job. This is not the full list. I just pulled some to put on the chart so you can see kind of what it gives you. It gives you the jobs and the medium wages and the growth forecast for them. And now we can move into some of the case studies that begin to share with us some partners that have used this. Now, like I said, you do this at the beginning, but you also can do it at the end to see how much you move the needle. So you can look at outcome versus just output for it. And I'll turn it over to Dawn. Take us to the first one.
Yeah, so this first example is about investing in commercial real estate in particular. So in Kentucky, there was a lender that was looking to make some investments, but also wanted to make sure that there was a lens of equity towards their investments in the community. And so one way in which they leverage the tools that are available and just data in general was actually do a bit of a deep dive and not necessarily look at all the places that had all high marks right now, right? Like everything is green, everything looks great, but looking at places where there were actually stability in the community and it was also growing. So to be able to invest there and to have communities that can be developed if you put more investment there and are really intentional about it. So what we saw was that the commercial developer was able to find another community, invest in it, and it's actually helping this community grow because it's actually investing in a way that makes sense. So it's both commercial real estate, but it also has housing above it. So therefore, folks are able to leverage both having affordable housing within that space and this commercial real estate space.
So even when you have those situations where the picture is not always rosy, the numbers could begin being low, but if you show that stability around, this reinforces it to what Don said. So it's helpful. The next one is a case study that happened in Erie, Pennsylvania. This is where they were looking for an investor to come in, and they were doing basically a revitalization of downtown is what they were doing. And I'm quite sure we've all had those moments, those passionate moments where we know there are food deserts, where we know there's something that's happening that you really want to get behind, but that's emotion. And people may not invest in emotion, but you got to have data to back it up to get them to get on board. And this is where the inclusive growth score can help as well. And this was an opportunity where we were able to bring in Mastercard consumer spend and partner that with the inclusive growth score, specifically around community diversity and around per capita spend and the loans that were happening in that area. And they were able to get a big chain supermarket firm to come in, invest in the area, and
didn't understand that.
That's my phone. Okay. They can come in and invest in the area and really make some changes. Everyone, we all have those areas of gentrification that are happening. You're trying to revitalize areas. So this could help in that, and where you direct the funds.
And then our last one is just our last case study before we open it up for questions. So excited to talk more through any questions you may have. But in Philly, in particular, they utilize some of these tools to really look at disparities within the city and dynamics of equity. So they saw a lot of small business growth, but when you actually looked under the hood a bit, you could see that actually minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses weren't growing at the same rate as white-owned businesses. So they leveraged this tool to make decisions around policies and where they were making investments to help address some of these disparities that they saw across the city. And so that included community-oriented programming and also just like what they were fighting for as a think tank as far as some of the policy solutions that the city could pass.
Yes.
So I know we just threw a lot of information at you.
Yeah.
Those are the places where you can also, the Solutions Hub is what Mark walked through that has all the various tools. So if you ever want to like dig in a bit more, go there. The Inclusive Growth Score app, that is also like part of, it helps you with the Inclusive Growth Score in particular. And then if you want to learn more about the work that Mark and I do around the $500 million towards closing the racial wealth and opportunity gap in the U.S., that the In Solidarity site is where to go there. But do want to open it up for questions.
Yeah. I'll just say this though. When you go to the Solutions Hub and you get ready to use the tools, you just have to open an account. It's free, but you just have to get an account because you have to have a login and password. Question?
Someone walk you through how to actually use that? Because the case studies are great, but for the average person to know, like, there's a town I'm interested in, I'm maybe interested in commercial. Can you somebody walk me through how to navigate this tool?
Two responses to that. It can be self-paced to the point where there's a user guide in there and it has and the methodology that breaks down everything. So if you just wanted to look at one particular thing, you still can do that as a beginning. But if you wanted to have an engagement and really employ all of those tools, then you can work with the Center for Inclusive Growth and we can do it with you. The access is free and it depends on how much the engagement is, but so don't put me on the spot for that one. But the access to the tools is free. Hey, I know you.
Hey, I was like all right.
I'll have a response to that. I don't know if you want to go first.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me speak from the inclusive growth score standpoint. Because it is tracked data and we can get down to the granular level, we don't specifically ask for racial information, but in getting that response that you have for inclusive growth, and you're talking about how a particular track looks, if that track and everybody that lives there looks like me and you, then you have your backing that you can go against redlining. You can go against some of these inequities, although we may not ask for it. So inclusion in this sense will be for everybody, but it still allows you to get to the ethnic or racial inclusion level for it. Now, this is the other response that I have to that. And this is just Mark talking, okay? We always start with inclusion, and it's supposed to be the big umbrella for everybody. That's how you got the whole BIPOC kind of thing, right? And then if you do the Black thing, which is in solidarity was really going after, we continue to do that. But in this particular landscape environment that we're in, I think inclusion is going to be more enveloping for everybody, even though it doesn't change your programming. It doesn't change your programming at all. But I think the language will be a bit more enveloping. I wouldn't say that because HBCUs don't. And we still continue to invest in
Various legislators up and down, but a lot of the time municipal level around their equity initiatives.
Yeah. You want to share your smart cities thing to us since you're going to HBCU? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
I think that's a really good question. I won't say that we in particular do that, but we work with a lot of CDFIs and make significant investment in CDFIs, because oftentimes when you can't be banked or get those types of loans from a traditional lender, CDFIs are the organizations that sort of fill that gap. And so that was part of the reason why we're very intentional about that, because they have that community relationship. They actually are in the community, talk to folks. They're like, they'll have a real detailed look at your finances and be like, oh, I see, like, you've been paying rent at this level, but but your credit is messed up from decisions you made back in the day. We can still give you this loan and we can work with you through this. So that is part of the intentionality around our investment in CDFIs.
I'll add a little bit to that as well, because the center.
Sorry, Mark, real quick.
Okay.
Just because I do this to myself sometimes. If I ever say an abbreviation and you don't know what it means, you can just throw up a jargon draft and I'll come back. But just to say what CDFIs are community development financial institutions.
The other thing, the two things that I would add to that is, one is for the focus on small business and those that have the bad, credit, or individuals that have the bad credit and trying to run the business. From the center overall, we do have investments in some of, like you said, the CDFIs and so forth that do the micro lending. So it helps there. But we've also added to our digital doors curriculum for small businesses that to teach the importance of having a banking relationship and the importance of separating a business account from personal account, so that we don't end up in that situation, like Dawn said, where the credit is just so mucked up that now they're paying these exorbitant amounts just to get money, either to keep the business going, or make payroll or whatever. So we're attacking it from a couple of different areas. One in the prevention, and then for those who are in that situations, to have microloans available to them through our grantee partners. That begins to get into even open banking. That is a bigger Mastercard issue, because now we're thinking about how can we use other dimensions to make decisioning on giving loans than just credit alone or just zip code. Maybe, okay, fine, they may be in that zip code that you deem as dark, if you will, but you have these other measures that we can pull on to show that they have paid money back, paid it early, pay whatever kind of behavioral type things, which gets into the more the open banking type things. And we're doing that as a company to get that out.
And I also will say, this is more anecdotal. We have worked with some of our banking partners to actually push on this a little bit and think about either alternative scoring and things like that for loans. I won't say that it's all perfect, and we're pushing in certain ways, and I think open banking is a good one that Mark pointed out. And then I also think through our investments with CDFIs in particular, we're trying to address this as a multi-pronged approach, because I think what you're saying is valid and true. But we haven't necessarily cracked that nut, but we're trying to influence it in various ways.
I could just say this thread, I think, is a thread that's going to continue. A lot of us on this panel that I'm moderating tomorrow. So I think you can't really put the blame also on the bankers, because the entrepreneur also doesn't have, one, the financial education, and two, the resources around them to have a good accountant. So I think it's hard to say, but it's just sort of like we're saying that they don't have an accountant because the accountants always show off, but then you got to go to the bank.
No, but I'm talking about an individual who has private financials. Like, who have the finances booked in order. Like, we have the same CPAs, like, and we have independent audit firms that go for our analytics, our financial statements, and our books. So I'm saying that even when they have everything in order, they still don't have it. This is the same case that happened with David General Credit Union, when you had all these African Americans who served in our military, who would have more money, who would have higher wages than their white counterparts, so they weren't denied mortgage loans, and their white counterparts were. It's systemic, and nobody's tackling the issue.
It's a bigger change, definitely, a bigger change that's needed, definitely. But in trying to align with the characters who are trying to look at these alternative methods, I mean, that's the thing, that's the action that's underway right now. Until we can get some legislative kind of change, to push things down. That's just my opinion there. Yeah. You're right. You're right. You're right. Yeah. Any other questions?
So Strive in particular focuses on small business. And so when they were identifying where we would focus our resources, the inclusive growth score was one of the tools that was leveraged to sort of identify where should we be looking in this landscape. So there were several factors that went into it, but that was one of the, sort of indicators of where we were going to do investments. So the states that they landed on were through utilizing these tools to see where we could actually have a real impact. So it is related and is one of the things that informed. I think there are other things like clearly like sort of where we want to grow as a Center for Inclusive Growth, all that type of stuff that also plays a role into it. But it was leveraged in identifying where we would go as far as the location. That's a good question. I would assume that is the case. One of our colleagues, Sandy Fernandez, is actually the one that leads a lot of our CDFI work, so I'm not sure about that piece. And that started well before I got to Mastercard, but I can ask.
But I would imagine the results from that at least let us know what was needed. And so then once you find out what's needed, you find out what CDFIs can supply it in those particular areas. If you're asking also as well, Strive versus the In Solidarity, In Solidarity is a bit broader, that we're just looking at financial security and government engagement, and Strive is small business only. But a lot of the work and a lot of the footprint, there's overlap. Same cities. We didn't tell you the cities that In Solidarity was, but it's in Atlanta, Birmingham, New York, LA, New Orleans, and Dayton, Ohio. Did I leave somebody out?
St. Louis
St. Louis.
and DC.
And yep, soon DC will be over that there. Yep.
So is there data collection on the information from the CDFI partners? Because a lot of them do that information as proprietary because they don't want to give out their own information best practices. So if you were to bring that to the CDFI in Overtown or like bring those best practices, do you all have any of that information, methodology, or best practices anywhere?
When you say data collection from the CDFIs, you mean?
They're lending, who they lend to, how they go about gauging and reckoning people that are willing to pay it back. Like, are you collecting that data, or is that just proprietary for them?
I'm not aware of us collecting that level of data, but we do ask for responses as part of the grant reporting to understand how the money is going, and then they give you some breakdown of maybe women versus men, small versus mature businesses, that kind of thing. But as far as their methodology, I'm not aware of us collecting that. To find out if some of those users are the people in those cities behind these different initiatives. I'm quite sure they probably have a record of who the users are, maybe even how many clicks they had on it. But I would have to ask to see, if they're taking it the next step to make the linkage.
I think it's also to keep folks informed when there's a update. So once you register, it also lets you know, like, oh, we've updated the census tract based on, whatever ACS data or whatever. So I think that's part of it, but it's a really good question. I'm not sure about that either.
Yep. Okay, I'm quite sure. I don't know if we've gone over our time or not, but Thank you guys for the engaging conversation and the questions, and I hope you found it useful. And you said there's a continuation of the conversation. Your session is when? All right. You guys heard it here, tomorrow at 5. All right.
All right, thanks, everybody.
And thank you.
Yes, thank you.